Hello, welcome back. Mr. Davis here, talking about melody writing. Today we're going to talk about chords and get a bit of an introduction into chord progressions. So let's go ahead and get started. Before we get too far, we really need to talk about what happened last week just so that we're all on the same page. Last week we were talking about how to elaborate a bass line. When we start elaborating a bass line, we have to determine the root of whatever triad we're using. So in this case, the root of each of these triads is the lowest note, so we just transpose that down into the bass. That gives us our starting bass note. How did we get those triads? Well, we used the note that begins the melody in each measure. As long as the triad contains that note, for the most part, we're able to use that triad. So we used a mixture of triads throughout throughout last week's examples. After that, we need to elaborate the bass, and we do that by shortening these half-note bass notes and interpreting notes in between. These interpretations are called melodic figures, these patterns that we commonly use. Here we have a couple of examples. We've got passing notes, which are notes that come in between the bass notes at the beginning of each measure. And it's just like passing along the way. We also have skip steps where we skip up a certain amount and then step back down towards our next bass note. So we've got two of those in this example. We also looked at how to use arpeggiation, which is just breaking up a triad melodically so that it kind of flows in a single direction, and broken chords where we take that same triad and sort of put it out in whatever order we please. There are other figures, but these are the ones that we looked at for last week, and we really just wanted to mix those up as much as possible to give us the most interesting and nice to listen to melody. Lastly, we just wanted to make sure that we leave the cadential motion alone. Aside from that, that's it. This is all old stuff. Let's get to the new stuff. That's what we're all here for. What exactly is a chord progression? Well, of course, the first thing I do is show you something that's not exactly a chord progression. But a chord progression is just a pattern of chords. And this is technically a pattern. This is a plagal amen cadence. We don't really need to remember the name of that. But really, chord progressions are the basis of basically all music in the Western world. And the Western world is like any European country or countries that come as colonies from European countries. We call that Western music if it comes out of one of those countries. And we use chord progressions as the basis of our music like since hundreds of years ago and continue to today, perhaps even more today than in the past. Chord progressions are kind of like a rhyme scheme. They repeat themselves. The listener expects to hear them go in a certain direction, especially after we've done it a couple of times within a song, and it establishes the key for your listener. Now, we name chords using Roman numerals. The Roman numerals indicates which scale note the whole triad is built on. So, and this plagal cadence here that I'm showing you is in the key of C. Since the first triad is built on the first note of the scale, we're going to call that the one chord, and we're using the Roman numeral for one to indicate that it is a chord or triad. This 1-4-1 motion is something that we often use in our classes at the end of a scale, which is why I'm showing it, because we're a little bit more familiar with it instead of using an actual chord progression. It's really commonly use this particular little mini progression at the end of hymns in Christian churches, and so because of that, it's a very familiar sound, and we sort of can feel it as a sort of amen at the end of a song. So we often use this in our scales to just sort of familiarize ourselves with that sound. Now, do we really have to use Roman numerals? Well, when it comes to chords, yeah, we really do. It's a convention that's used across music. There's a reason why we use quarter notes to indicate one beat and half notes to indicate two beats and just things like that. These conventions, we use them so that everyone's speaking the same language. But there are some specific benefits to using Roman numerals. Since we only use them for chords, when you see a Roman numeral, you know that means that we're talking about a chord. That definitely simplifies the whole thinking process. But really, the most important reason is because Roman numerals can be capitalized. If they're upper or lowercase, we can tell if a chord is major or minor without having to write a minor when we can just write lowercase 3. The chords in a given key will always follow the same pattern of major and minor, and there are some other chord types. So before we start talking about what actual progressions look like, we really need to determine how a chord or a triad becomes major or minor. So let's jump right into that. A triad is just a stack of thirds, two thirds stacked directly on top of each other. Whether those thirds individually are major or minor determines if our triad is major or minor. Quick tip though, the tri, just like in triangle, means 3. So we stack thirds, therefore we get a triad. Just if you need to remember what exactly a triad specifically is, just a little quick tip there for you. So we have our two thirds stacked on top of each other. In this case, our lowest third is C to an E. This is bass clef, is the same thing, C to an E. So we count our semitones. So from C we go to C sharp, which is 1, D, D sharp, E. So we get 4 semitones. 4 semitones, if you'll remember from our earlier lessons, gives us a major third. And that third on top of it, E to G, we go E natural to F, F sharp, G. That's only 3 semitones. Wham bam, we get ourselves a minor third. Stacking a minor third on top of a major third gives us a major triad. Really, really simple. Let's look at a minor. It's actually even simpler if you know what a major triad looks like, because a minor triad is just an inversion of that. So E to G in this case, we got E to F natural, F sharp, G, just like in the last triad. That's a minor third, and stacked on top of that is a major third. So we've really just inverted whether we have a minor on the bottom or major on top, or vice versa. So a major stacked on top of a minor gives us a minor triad. Ta-da! Really, really simple. So here's all the triads in the C major scale, or at least the first 6. Let's quickly analyze them. We're just going to analyze the first 2 so we don't take up all of your time here. We want to move through this pretty quickly. So in order to figure out whether this is major or minor, we'll follow a few steps. First, we're going to look at the root of the chord. The root is going to tell us what the number is. So obviously we need to know our key. We're still working in C major here. Since we're in C, the first note of the scale is on the bottom of the triad. That must mean that this is the 1 chord. Okay, very, very straightforward in that case. What chord is it? Well, it's based off of the scale degree, and therefore it gets the number of the scale degree. Then we have to look at what the thirds are within this particular triad. We've got a minor third on top, a major third on the bottom. We've obviously already looked at this chord, so we know that we then have a major triad. Last thing we need to do is convert that to a Roman numeral. So since it is the 1 chord, we're going to need a 1 Roman numeral, and that can be upper or lowercase, and we use uppercase for major, so we use uppercase I as our Roman numeral. Taking a look at one more, this is the 2 because we're starting on D, which is the second note in the C major scale. So we start off with that root. We know that this then is going to be the 2 chord, or the 2 triad. We determine the thirds. We've got the major third over top of a minor third, so this must be a minor triad. Voila. So since we now know that this is the 2 chord and it is a minor 2, we need to figure out what the Roman numeral is. Well, the lowercase Roman numeral is lowercase I. Aha. Awesome. That's simple. So here's what we're at right now. Let's take a look at the other chords. With the 3 chord, we're going from E to G and G to B. Well, we actually already looked at that one. We know that that is a minor chord. And since it's the 3, we're going to use 3 I's in a row to give us a lowercase Roman numeral 3. The 4 and the 5 are both major, and the 6 is a minor chord. But what happened to the 7 triad? Why did we not look at that? Well, the thing is, a 7 in a major scale or in the major key is a little unique. And that's because of the thirds that it's constructed of. In this case, the B to a D is a minor third, which is, we see that, of course, in minor triads. So the top, you would expect then to be a major third, but it's not. It's also a minor third. When we put 2 minor thirds together, we get a really unique sound. This is called a diminished triad. So I'm going to move right over to Sibelius for a second here. And I'm just going to take chord at the very, very beginning. Yeah, let's go right there. So we have a major triad. I hope you can hear that okay. Now, if I were to take this is going from G to B, which is a major third and then a minor third. If I were to flatten this to sorry, there we go, to a B flat. This one is a B flat as well. We now get just a minor triad. Minor triad. Okay, but if I flatten this one as well, so now I've got two minor thirds stacked on top of each other, we get this sound. That sort of crunchiness. That is a diminished sounding chord. So diminished have a sort of unique function. And we don't use them as often. They are really important in chord progressions, but you won't usually pick a diminished triad unless you have a very specific use for this. This one has a special notation though, because lowercase 7 in this case is not enough information. That only tells us it's minor. We also need to put this little 0 in the upper corner, and that tells us that this is a diminished triad. So here we go. I've moved these triads down just because no one likes reading leisure lines, but there's our whole set. So quick review. Here's our whole set. The the triads of a major key will always follow this pattern. The first, fourth, and fifth are major. The second, third, and sixth are minor, and the seventh is always diminished. This pattern will be used no matter what key you're in, whether you're in C major or A major or whatever, B flat major. The quality of a triad is determined by the two thirds that make it up, what the bottom third is and the top third is. A minor on top of a major makes a major triad. A major on top of a minor makes a minor triad. And two minors give us a diminished triad. So the exercise associated with this is pretty simple. There's one tone savvy exercise for my online students. Everybody else, you'll be doing melody writing 6, which is Roman numerals practice. It's a handout. It will not take you very long. Just like this video, it is on the short side. So you shouldn't be taking too much time to do this. Next lesson, we're actually going to look at examples of well-known chord progressions and possibly some bits of songs to go with them. And we'll begin composing a melody that goes over top of our favorite progressions. So that's all for this week's lessons. For my students, we will also be having a listening assignment this week. So stay tuned for that. Talk to you all again soon. Hope you're enjoying this this series of videos. If you have any comments or any questions, please do feel free to send me a note, either by posting on my YouTube channel or emailing me directly. Have a great weekend or week or whenever you're doing this this video, and we'll see you again next time.